There is a peculiar arrogance in the human heart that believes darkness can hide forever. The narcissist lives in that illusion, the illusion that manipulation leaves no echo, that cruelty leaves no trace, that betrayal dissolves into time like smoke in the wind. But time, my friend, is not a vacuum, it is a witness. Every word spoken in deceit, every tear caused by pride, every secret act of betrayal, all of it is recorded in a realm where human memory cannot reach. They believed they had gotten away with it, that you would never rise again, that your tears would drown your strength, that their lies would stand as the final story. But what they forgot, what the proud always forget, is that God sees in silence. And when God watches in silence, it is never apathy, it is patience, the calm before the thunder. C.S. Lewis once wrote that, when the author walks onto the stage, the play is over. The narcissist mistook God's patience for absence. They mistook his stillness for surrender. They thought they had escaped the consequences of cruelty, but the author is now walking onto the stage. The story is turning. Judgment has begun. God's silence is never approval. One of the most painful seasons a faithful heart can endure is the season of divine silence. You know that silence the nights when your pillow remembers your tears, when your prayers echo in the dark, when the person who wounded you walks away laughing while you are left holding the pieces. And in that silence, a dangerous lie often tries to settle in your soul. Maybe God didn't care. Maybe he agreed with what they did. Maybe he's not going to do anything at all. But I tell you, God's silence is never approval. It is never consent to injustice. It is never a sign that he has turned away. When God is silent, he is not sleeping. He is preparing. When you stood in pain, God stood in the shadows building a courtroom. While they danced on the stage of arrogance, God was writing the verdict. While you questioned his presence, heaven was gathering evidence. You see, a narcissist's greatest miscalculation is this: they mistake God's patience for permission. They believe because they weren't struck down immediately, they never will be. But the silence of God is like the deep stillness before a storm. It does not signal weakness, it signals precision. C.S. Lewis once wrote that God is not in a hurry, because he is eternal. And that is the essence of divine justice. He does not act according to your clock or theirs. He acts according to eternity. While they strutted in pride, thinking their lies had no consequence, the invisible gears of justice were already turning. Every moment they boasted, every time they mocked your pain, every careless wound they inflicted, it was all noted in a place where nothing is forgotten. And here's the deeper mystery. God often allows narcissists to build their own tower of arrogance, high enough to collapse under its own weight. He lets them create the very stage upon which their downfall will be displayed. They believe they are free. They believe they are untouchable. But what they cannot see is the rope of their own choices tightening around them. His silence is a strategy, not surrender. Look at the story of Pharaoh. Each time Pharaoh defied God, the plagues did not strike immediately with their full force. God waited. He gave space. Pharaoh interpreted that delay as dominance. But judgment was already marching down the Nile, patient, unstoppable. Likewise, the narcissist who thought they could mock your soul, play with your heart, and walk away untouched, they are standing in borrowed time. God's silence was never for their benefit, it was for yours. He was using the stillness to mature you, to sharpen your discernment, to deepen your faith, so that when his judgment came, you would not crumble with them, but rise above them. If he had struck too soon, you would have still been tied to them, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, but he waited until your heart was no longer chained to their chaos. He waited until you could stand in strength, not desperation. And then, when the hour of justice finally struck, you would be standing on solid ground while they faced the storm they themselves created. Silence is not absence, it's strategy. And when God finally moves, he He does not whisper, he thunders. You may not have seen it yet, but their reckoning is already unfolding. Every false smile, every cruel act, every manipulation has an expiration date, and heaven keeps perfect time. So the next time you look at the night sky and wonder if God is doing anything, remember this. He was watching every tear. He was counting every betrayal. He was listening to every prayer uttered between sobs. And though he seemed silent, he was preparing something far greater than quick revenge. He was preparing justice that cannot be reversed. The narcissist thought silence meant safety, but silence only meant God was building the stage where truth will roar. God let them rise so everyone could see their fall. Sometimes, the most confusing part of God's justice is that, before he brings a narcissist down, he lets them rise. He lets them look powerful. He lets them look untouchable. He allows them to enjoy a moment of applause, a season of success, a time when everyone believes their lies, and you, the one they hurt, sit there wondering, why does God keep blessing the wicked? It's one of the oldest cries of the human heart. The psalmist asked the same question. Jeremiah asked it. Even Job, broken and bruised, asked it. Why do the wicked prosper? And the answer, though painful, is profoundly divine, because God is building a stage where their downfall will become a lesson for the world. If God had cut them down too early, no one would have seen their true nature. People would have called them victims, misunderstood souls, or the good ones who were mistreated. So God lets them climb not because he favors them, but because he's exposing them. Think of it this way. A narcissist's rise is like a balloon being filled with air. The more air, the bigger it gets. The bigger it gets, the thinner the walls become. Until one day, with the smallest touch of truth, it bursts, and everyone sees that it was never substance, only air. That's what God does with the proud. He gives them rope, and they keep pulling, thinking they're rising higher, not realizing they're wrapping that rope around their own neck. He lets their voice echo in rooms they don't deserve to stand in, because he knows their own words will later testify against them. He lets them enjoy the spotlight, because he knows that very light will expose every lie they've spoken in the dark. It's divine irony, heaven's poetry of justice. You see, a narcissist thrives on image. They build kingdoms of illusion, ruled by manipulation, control, and charm. They rise not through truth, but through performance. And God, in his infinite patience, allows the show to go on just long enough for the audience to see behind the curtain. Because judgment is not always thunder and lightning. Sometimes, judgment is revelation. Sometimes, it's the moment when masks fall off, and everyone finally sees what God saw all along. And when that happens, when truth finally collides with illusion, their fall is not just personal, it becomes public revelation. People start to whisper, wait, maybe they weren't who we thought. Doors close, favor fades, the charm no longer works. The narcissist looks around, and suddenly the power they once had evaporates, not because anyone attacked them, but because truth finally entered the room. And here's the paradox. While they were rising, you were breaking. While they were being celebrated, you were being isolated. While they were speaking loudly, you were being silenced. But God was watching both stories at once. He allowed their rise to test your humility and their fall to confirm your restoration. Because when he lifts you, he wants it to be different. He wants your rise to be rooted, not inflated. He wants your strength to be built in silence, not spectacle. He wants people to see the difference between false power that burns quickly and divine power that endures forever. When the narcissist falls, and they always do, God ensures that the very people who once praised them will see the truth. He doesn't just vindicate you in secret, he vindicates you in the same places you were humiliated. He lets those who doubted you witness his justice. Because the fall of the narcissist is not random punishment, it's divine storytelling. It's God saying to the world, See what happens when pride tries to replace love. See what happens when deception tries to mimic truth. So don't envy their rise. It's not a blessing, it's bait. And when the time comes, their fall will be the sermon heaven never needed words to preach. God's judgment doesn't come to destroy you, but to free you. When people hear the word judgment, they often imagine punishment, wrath, fire, destruction. But what if I told you that God's judgment is not about destruction, it's about deliverance? You see, when God begins to judge the narcissist, he's not merely striking at their evil, he's cutting you free from the power they once had over your soul. The moment divine judgment begins, it's not only the end of their control, it's the beginning of your release. For so long, you prayed for God to rescue you, to help you escape their manipulation, their emotional grip, their spiritual darkness. But deliverance rarely looks like what we expect. Sometimes, God doesn't simply remove you, he removes them. Sometimes he doesn't just heal you privately, he exposes them publicly. Because the two stories are connected, your freedom is hidden in their fall. C.S. Lewis once said, "We can ignore pleasure, but pain insists upon being attended to." God uses judgment the same way, not as a weapon against you, but as a wake-up call to your spirit. It shakes the dust off your soul. It awakens your discernment. It reminds you who you are, without their lies echoing in your head. When God brings judgment, he's not being cruel, he's being surgical. He cuts away what was killing you. He removes the voice that distorted your worth. He burns down the false altar you built out of fear and longing. Because God cannot bless what holds you hostage. The narcissist was never just a person, they were a prison. A system of control built through charm, guilt, and gaslighting. They didn't just want your love, they wanted your light. They didn't just take from your life, they tried to rewrite your identity. And so when judgment comes, it's not God's anger, it's God's mercy in motion. He's saying, "Enough. My child has suffered long enough. I will break this yoke." At first, it doesn't feel merciful. Judgment always begins with shaking. Everything that was once stable begins to collapse, the illusion, the connection, even the memories you thought were sacred. You look at the ruins and wonder if God went too far. But that's the paradox of divine love. Sometimes he has to wreck your false peace to give you real peace. He has to let the old life burn so the new one can breathe. He has to tear down the counterfeit so the truth can finally live. And the narcissist, in their blindness, thinks you're the one being destroyed. They'll say, "Look how broken you are, look what you lost." But what they can't see is that you're being reborn. The collapse they mocked was the moment heaven began to rebuild your foundation, this time on truth. God's judgment doesn't only address what they did to you, it also addresses what you believed because of them. He goes after every lie they planted in your soul, that you were not enough, that you were hard to love, that you were too sensitive, too emotional, too needy. He brings each of those lies to the surface, not to shame you, but to purge you. Because real judgment is purification. When God judges, he separates light from darkness, truth from illusion, gold from ashes. He divides so that you can discern. He removes what you once clung to so that you can finally hold on to him. And the moment you begin to see his hand not as punishment but as protection, your heart shifts. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start whispering, "Thank you, God, for saving me from what I couldn't see." The narcissist thought their reign over you was permanent. They thought your silence meant surrender, but they didn't understand. You weren't being destroyed, you were being delivered. The very chaos they caused became the environment of your awakening. The fire they meant for your end became the forge of your transformation. And when God brings you out, he doesn't bring you out empty. He restores what they stole, your joy, your clarity, your faith in your own worth. He restores it quietly, not through revenge, but through resurrection. Because judgment isn't God's final word, freedom is. He doesn't judge to crush, he judges to cleanse. He doesn't expose to humiliate, he exposes to liberate. He doesn't end something to punish you, he ends something so he can begin you again. And when you look back one day, you'll see it not as a curse, not as cruelty, but as the most loving interruption heaven ever allowed. You'll say, if God hadn't judged it, I would have stayed in it. And in that moment, you'll realize his justice was your mercy in disguise. When God judges, he also reveals. When God moves in judgment, he never comes merely to punish, he comes to reveal. Because divine justice is not about vengeance, it's about truth coming into view. The narcissist built their power on illusion, and illusion can only live in the dark. It feeds on confusion, on secrecy, on the manipulation of perception. They twist truth into shapes that serve them. They wear masks so well that even you, the one who loved them, began to doubt your own eyes. But when God's judgment begins, the light changes everything. Suddenly, what was once hidden becomes impossible to ignore. The same people who once defended them begin to feel uneasy. The charm that once blinded others begins to rot from within. The words that once inspired trust begin to sound hollow. That's what revelation looks like. It's not chaos, it's clarity. God's light doesn't just expose what they did, it exposes who they are. And that revelation is their undoing. C.S. Lewis wrote that the closer a creature gets to God, the clearer it becomes, both in beauty and in corruption. In heaven's light, nothing can hide its true nature. The narcissist may have looked righteous, generous, spiritual, even holy, but the moment divine truth shines, that false holiness burns away like paper in flame. What's left is not the image they built, but the emptiness they tried to fill. When God reveals, he doesn't just tell the world who they are, he shows you who you were becoming. Because sometimes, revelation is also redemption. He shows you how you lost yourself in their approval, how you dimmed your light to survive their shadow, how you confused being loyal with being trapped. And in that holy mirror of revelation, you begin to see not only their deception, but your awakening. That's the hidden mercy of God's judgment. It doesn't just reveal their sin, it reveals your strength. When truth breaks through, you start to remember who you were before the manipulation, the person who laughed freely, who trusted deeply, who dreamed without fear. You begin to see the divine fingerprints that were always on your life, even when you couldn't feel them. And you realize that the entire ordeal, their betrayal, your heartbreak, the silence, the confusion, was all part of a larger unveiling. Because when God reveals, he restores order to the moral universe. He brings things back into alignment. The wicked are shown for what they are, the righteous are vindicated, and the broken begin to heal, not through revenge, but through truth. Truth is God's favorite weapon. It doesn't kill the body, it kills the lie. And once the lie dies, freedom begins. The narcissist's power was never real. It existed only as long as people believed it. But when God's light exposes the rot beneath the surface, that illusion collapses. Suddenly, what they built with charm and control becomes a monument to their own deception. The same stage they used to elevate themselves becomes the ground of their exposure. And here's the beautiful paradox. When God reveals them, he also reveals himself. Through every unmasking, every truth unveiled, every secret brought into the open, he whispers, I saw it all along, I was never blind to your pain. He shows the world what was hidden. He shows you what was sacred. He shows that justice was never delayed, it was simply ripening in the dark. God's revelation is not meant to humiliate, it's meant to heal. Because you can't heal from what you won't face. And you can't face what you can't see. So when the light comes, and truth finally stands naked before your eyes, it hurts, but it also sets you free. And once truth has spoken, nothing can return to illusion again. You'll never look at manipulation the same way. You'll never romanticize toxicity again. You'll never mistake control for love, because revelation changes your vision forever. That's what happens when God judges. He removes the disguises. He unmasks the deceivers. He turns the stage lights on in a dark theater, and every actor must stand in their true form. For the narcissist, it's the beginning of shame. For you, it's the beginning of sight. And in that light, you finally understand. God didn't reveal them to destroy your faith. He revealed them so your faith could finally rest on truth, not illusion. His revelation wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of your wisdom. When God judges, he restores the broken. Every act of divine judgment carries within it a hidden seed of mercy. Because when God tears something down, it's never for the sake of destruction, it's for rebuilding. And that rebuilding often begins with you, the one who was broken by the narcissist's lies, by betrayal, by years of trying to be enough for someone who was never capable of love. See, when the narcissist falls, you're not watching entertainment, you're witnessing divine rebalancing. God isn't just bringing them down, he's bringing you up. He's reversing the equation that once kept you small and silenced. C.S. Lewis once said, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. And that's exactly what happens in the aftermath of betrayal. In the silence that follows chaos, in the stillness after the storm, God's voice becomes clearer than ever. He begins to speak not to your wounds, but through them. Because your pain, when placed in his hands, becomes a doorway to purpose. He doesn't waste anything, not a single tear, not a single sleepless night, not a single, "Why me?" whispered in the dark. He takes all of it and turns it into wisdom, compassion, and power. When God restores, he doesn't simply give you back what you lost. He transforms what you lost into something new, something sacred. He doesn't give you the same kind of peace you had before the storm. He gives you peace that cannot be stolen again. That's how divine restoration works. It's not replacement, it's resurrection. The narcissist tried to bury you, but they didn't realize you were a seed. They thought silence would end you, but it became the soil where your roots grew deep. They thought rejection would break you, but it became the tool God used to redirect you. They thought ending the relationship was victory, but it was the very event that set heaven's restoration plan into motion. Because before God restores your life, he removes every counterfeit piece that doesn't belong in it. He strips away the illusions you used to call love, the voices you used to call truth, the attachments you mistook for destiny. He empties your hands, not to punish you, but to prepare you, because what he's about to give, your old self couldn't have carried. And as the dust settles, you begin to notice something miraculous. The same heart that was once shattered now beats stronger. The same soul that was once desperate now walks in peace. The same mind that was once full of confusion now glows with clarity. This is not coincidence. It's the sacred rhythm of divine restoration. God doesn't heal you back to who you were before he heals you forward, into who you were meant to become. Because sometimes, the only way for God to reveal your true identity is to allow everything false to collapse around you. And when it does, you realize you were never broken beyond repair, you were being rebuilt beyond recognition. Look at your scars. They are not marks of failure, they're proof of transformation. They're the fingerprints of God's mercy pressed into the clay of your humanity. He could have left you in the wreckage, but he didn't. He could have allowed you to stay bitter, but he chose to make you better. He could have allowed your heart to harden, but instead, he turned it into a garden where grace grows. That's what divine judgment really leads to: restoration of the humble. The narcissist's downfall is dramatic, but your restoration is quiet. Theirs happens in front of the crowd, yours happens in the secret place, where God whispers, "You're mine, and I'm not done with you." He rebuilds your confidence, one truth at a time. He redefines your worth, not by who left you, but by who created you. He fills the empty spaces that manipulation hollowed out. And before you know it, you begin to shine again, not with the fragile glow of validation, but with the steady fire of divine purpose. The same people who once pitied you will marvel at your strength. The same ones who thought you were finished will see you flourishing. Because your restoration isn't meant to be hidden, it's meant to testify. God uses restored people as living proof that His justice isn't just about balance, it's about beauty. He doesn't only make wrongs right, He makes ashes beautiful. And when He does, you become the very thing the narcissist never expected, a walking contradiction to their cruelty. They wanted to break you. Instead, they helped awaken you. And that's how God wins. Not by revenge, but by redemption. Not by striking them down, but by raising you up. Because the true sign that God's judgment has begun is not that they're suffering, it's that you're standing again. It's that your heart beats in hope. It's that your soul sings in freedom. It's that your story, once filled with tears, now carries the sound of triumph. That's how heaven writes justice in the ink of restoration. The narcissist's fall may make noise, but your healing makes meaning. And in the silence that follows, God smiles because the balance has been restored. Your rise is God's final judgment. And now, look at what remains after the storm. You, still standing, still radiant, still carrying the quiet strength that only fire can forge. This, right here, is the final judgment. Not their downfall, but your endurance. Not their suffering, but your peace. Because God's justice has never been about punishment alone. It has always been about restoration, about proving that light will outlast deceit. When He allowed the narcissist to break you, He already saw the day you would rise again, carrying not bitterness, but wisdom. Your life now becomes the testimony. Every step forward, every breath of calm, every door that opens in your favor, these are heaven's declarations that judgment has been rendered. The scales are balanced, not by revenge, but by your resurrection. So walk on, not in anger, but in quiet triumph. Let your healing be the sound of divine justice completed, for in the end, your rise was God's answer all along.